Whoever is running the Zoom, if you could please promote Counselor Romero Worth to being a panelist, I believe. Also, apparently John Blair may be jumping on as well. So if he comes on, please promote him too.
Also, I need to be promoted. For some reason, it didn't take. This is Marcella.
Also, where are my committee members?
You three
Thank
are
you.
all panelists. Thank you.
Can we please go live?
We are live.
Oh, you did it so fast. I didn't have the agenda pulled up. All right. It is 5:02 p.m. I am calling the Wednesday, September 8th Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. May I please have a roll call?
Present.
Yes, here present.
Here.
Presente. I'm here. Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do I have any changes from staff or members of the committee? And if not, can I get a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Marcella, what did we have pulled today?
Madam Chair, we have items H and item J.
Wonderful. Is there anything that members would like to pull at this time?
Would like to pull item C to recuse myself.
All right. Anything else? And if not, can I get a motion to approve as amended?
Motion to approve as amended. Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. And Elizabeth, is your mic on? No problem. I'm sure the members of the public could guess who was voting based on who said yes. So no worries. All right, moving on to the consent. We have no presentations today. So this is request for approval of a subrecipient grant agreement with the New Mexico Department of Finance Authority's Local Government Division in the amount of $2 million for affordable housing grants and services for the Country Club Apartments with a performance period ending June 30th, 2026. We do not have anyone here to present. There's also a C1. It is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution bar to budget revenue in the amount of $2 million from New Mexico Department of Finance Authority's Local Government Division for affordable housing grants and services for the Country Club Apartments. Councilor Castro did poll to recuse. She has stepped out. Any other questions or comments from the committee, or is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro.
Please recuse.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Cassie.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Randy. Moving on to item H, this is request for approval of restated and extended memorandum of agreement with Santa Fe County to transfer the Santa Fe Film Office to the City of Santa Fe. We have Randy Randall, our interim community development director, and our permanent tourism director here to present. And City Manager Blair is also on, I'm assuming, for this item. Counselor Garcia, you pulled this. I will send it over to you. Would you like an explanation from staff or just to jump into questions?
Sure. I mean, the first question I have is if we can get an overview, why move, given there was a previous agreement? Just a broad kind of overview.
Counselor, Madam Chair, I think the film office, has been a joint city-county entity since it was created about 8-9 years ago. And it's always been under the administrative support of the county. And I think probably during the effort we made to bring Sundance here, we realized that there was such a close relationship between a lot of what we're doing in tourism, what we're doing in economic development, that it would be beneficial for the film office to be a little more closely aligned administratively with the city. And so this would just be to shift the oversight of the film office from the county to the city.
Thank you for that overview, Director Randall. So as I was looking through the MOA, a couple questions arose. First question I've got is, so I'm going to refer to the MOA on page 2. On item 2, under transfer film office director funds and resources assignment of agreements, I'm going to refer to item A. In particular, I'm going to look at the last sentence where it says the city shall recognize and accrue on its books all of the director's accumulated leave, provided however that the director's leave therefore after shall be governed by the city's policies. So I've got a lot of questions about that. So we'll just go piecemeal by piecemeal. What does this accrued leave look like currently? Do we have figures for that, whether it be personal leave and value, sick leave and value? What is this sentence covering?
Counselor, Madam Chair, I don't have those numbers with me. I have seen them, but I can't recall exactly what they are. So I can send you those numbers. I'm happy to do that. I think one of the concerns in having that sentence in there was to be sure that there were sufficient funds in the accumulated balances of the film office to cover that. And there's more than sufficient funds in the film office balance to cover that accumulated leave. So it doesn't put any additional liability on either the city or the county by that happening. I know that the county has some restrictions on how much leave can be paid out when an employee leaves their employment. And from their technical standpoint, this is the director of the film office would be leaving the county's employment. So she would lose some of that accumulated annual leave. I think it was about 40 or 50 hours over their 240. So I think it was about 280 hours of leave. And also the fact that she'd have to start over with any accrual of sick leave seemed to be unfair, again, since this had been a joint office and we're just shifting the administrative responsibilities. And again, there's more than enough funds in the accumulated balances that will move with the office to cover this cost. But I can get you the exact numbers on the amount of the fund balance, the amount of the value of the accumulated leave, and the value of the accumulated sick leave, the annual leave and sick leave. Those are the only two components that addresses there.
Okay, and my follow-up to that is, should that be in this agreement? Because I think we as the governing body should be aware of what costs we're taking on, and that is an absolute cost there. And so
But again, we're receiving funds with the office that more than cover that cost. So, but I'm happy to get you that information, sir.
Okay, and I think that's where, if we can confer with the city attorney, if that should be in there, because I'd hate to be in a position where certain leave is not initiated on the city's end, and there's nothing for example, the employee to fall back on and say, well, I had X amount of hours and you're only giving me Y amount of hours. That way it's crystal clear what is being transferred over in those regards. You did answer one of the questions I had, which was the funding in regards to, is the county then going to cover those costs? Because leave does come at a cost, whether it's personal leave or sick leave. And I wanted to ensure that the costs were covered through this initial agreement, that it wasn't going to come out of a separate source of funds. And from what you're saying, there is enough sufficient funds, but I think that's where it's helpful to have the breakdown of the leave to say this leave has a value of X. There is Y amount available in the fund. We can cover X. And so I think that's where it's helpful to have all that broken out. Last follow-up I have on this is, do we know if this person that's in this current position is going to be paid out of leave? So when an individual, for the public that's not aware, when an individual's employed by government, such as the city or the county, personal leave, they can cash out when they leave the entity. Sick leave, usually not the case. Is there anything that stipulates this individual cannot cash out the personal leave because it's going to be rolled over to the city? Because I don't see that here, that it's prohibiting that action from taking place.
Counselor, Madam Chair, I don't think there's anything in this that says that, but if she were cashed out on leave, then the leave would not be available to move forward. So I think in statement A, which is talking about accumulated leave moving forward, it would only be available accumulated leave. And so if she cashed out, I mean, there'll be an accounting that's done at the exact time that this occurs. And so if the county paid her out 240 hours and she had 280 hours, there'd only be 40 hours of leave there that then could move forward.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think we're with these questions, we're really getting into the weeds, which typically is not the case. Given that these type of positions, even when there's a transfer, the employee has to reapply. It becomes an open position. And so can you clarify for me, is this going to be an exempt at will position or an exempt protected position?
Counselor, Madam Chair, it's my understanding it's exempt at will.
Okay. And so typically, even for exempt at will positions, we will post the position up for hire. And I think that's why I'm asking these initial questions, because we usually don't get into those details. It's too sticky, right? And we look back, in instances where there have been employees of a separate entity that has supported city initiatives, and we can look back to when P&M dissolved and we formed the water company, right? And all those P&M employees had to apply and become city employees. Those employees at the time did not get the opportunity to have all their leave rolled over. And so this is a complete one-off situation. Precedent starts to get in my mind of, okay, if we're starting to hire exempt employees, are we going to recognize leave as we partnered up with the city? I think those are questions to be asked in the future, but it's usually not the way where if an employee leaves an entity, they leave behind all those benefits and they start fresh with us. And this is where I want to make sure.
Sure. And Counselor, I think, and Madam Chair, I think the fact that you used the exact term, this is really a one-off. And the fact that ever since this office began, it's been jointly funded, equally funded by the city and the county.
Right.
So it's not a P and M. We weren't funding any of those employees before they came to us. We were involved on the interview committee for her hire. So we've been a participant in this entity, definitely the minor participant, equal funder, but a minor participant. We're just going to move now to the major participant. County stays minor. County will actually be involved if we hire additional staff. They'll be able to have someone on the interview committee. And we're just shifting roles with the county. But the employee has, while not officially been working for the city, she's been funded by the city ever since this began. So I think it is a very unique, it's a unicorn, really. And certainly I haven't seen this before.
Right. And in my 2 decades plus of government, I hadn't, that's why I reached out to HR Director Salazar. She hadn't seen anything in her wealth of experience. And I just wanted to make sure ultimately we weren't violating any internal policies. Because I think we want to make sure we're doing things right. And so,
And Councilor, Madam Chair, this was negotiated by the city attorney. So she's comfortable with it.
And City Manager Blair, you did have your hand up. I don't know if you would still like to weigh in on this topic, but please do if you would.
Madam Chair, Randall did a great job. This is a different experience than any other employee we've had. The city has been paying half of all the operating expenses of the film office. We've been paying half the salary of the employees. We've been paying half the leave of all these employees. And so because of that situation, which was different than, say, a county employee applying for a job moving over, there was discussion around this issue. But that's it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilor Garcia, any further questions at this time?
yes, I do. So because this position is now falling under our purview, and with the recent class and comp, I want to make sure that this position gets considered for any future class and comp studies. Do we have a job description for this position?
Councilor, Madam Chair, the job description exists with the county. It will move over with the position. And I don't know if it's been evaluated on, I don't know what class and comp ranking it's received. I can determine that for you as well.
Well, not necessarily with the past study because it's done. It's just more so we're prepped for any future consideration.
Okay.
So just want to make sure if, we have it with any position within the city, there should be job descriptions. We answered the question around it won't be posted. And then ultimately, because we didn't get like a breakdown of costs, just the overall costs of which entity is putting in what. And I'm going to ask, are all costs staying the same that the county was incurring, or are there going to be different costs that the city is going to incur, whether it's, salaries for staff, project expenditures? I know in positions like this, especially with the film industry, there might be travel associated. Any reason that the costs are going to change from what the expenditures that the county was expending?
Councilor, Madam Chair, I think the only thing might be some office expenses if copy costs. I don't know if the county was charging the entity for that, but all travel, all staff costs, all inbound entertaining if she has to work with film scouts as they're coming through. All of that's been covered by the budget in the past, and it would be covered by this budget that's funded 50% by the city and 50% by the county.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I do see in the MOU how we are on page 3, under B, numbers 2. And then under A, under on that same page, but it's providing a forecasting. And so for this fiscal year, it stays at 175. Next fiscal year 26, it raises by $25,000, stays that same rate for a year, and then fiscal year 28, $225,000. Any reason, justification why we're bumping it up by $50,000 if costs are staying the same?
Counselor, Madam Chair, it's just to provide for some inflationary costs, and we do intend to provide more support. It's a one-person office right now. I know that there's been an effort on the part of the county to fill a second position over the past year at least, and we feel we'll be able to get that position filled a little bit quicker. So there is some additional staff that we feel the office needs that will be covered through those increases and through the fund balances that are coming.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. No other questions, but if you can get me the data around the costs for transferring the benefits. I think check with the city attorney if we can share that publicly or not. I mean, because that is somewhat maybe confidential information because it is HR. Don't want to violate that, but I do want to ensure that we have enough resources to cover that should that be part of this agreement. With that, no other questions, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Randall.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Can I have a
To
motion?
approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Chair Bassett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to item J. This is consideration of a resolution sponsored by Counselor Carol Romero Worth, Counselor Alma Castro, and Counselor Amanda Chavez. A resolution directing the city manager to investigate the feasibility of relocating the Soldiers Monument to the Santa Fe National Cemetery and, if feasible, to take appropriate steps to relocate the monument, recognizing the distinct purposes of the plaza and the monument. We have Erin McSherry here as our staff member, as well as the sponsors. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to the sponsors for introduction, and then I'm sure that there will be a robust conversation. Counselor Chavez, I'll pass on to you.
Thank you, Chair. We do have Counselor Romero Worth here, and I think she did an amazing introduction to this at Public Works on Monday. And I think for consistency of the information and clarity, I'd like to turn it over to her. I believe she's on Zoom.
That sounds great. Counselor Romero Worth?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members. I know some of you have heard this presentation before. For some of you, this will be new. So what I have been doing, I have been now to the Arts Commission, to the Veterans Affairs Board twice. I spent a day in district court with the trial, and I think, and in talking to community members, I have decided that reading this resolution is helpful. And so I'm going to ask for your indulgence with that, because I think there's a lot of work that went into putting this together, like all of our resolutions. And it does help answer some of the questions that I think come up repeatedly around this topic. And it lays out, I think, the argument for why this is something we might want to pursue. So again, a resolution directing the city manager to investigate the feasibility of relocating the Soldiers Monument to the National Cemetery, and if feasible, to take appropriate steps to relocate the monument, recognizing the distinct purposes of the plaza and the monument. Whereas the governing body of the city of Santa Fe recognizes the community's need to move forward after the emotional events of October 2020, when the obelisk located in the Santa Fe Plaza, also known as the Soldiers Monument or obelisk, was damaged and partially torn down. And whereas the city sought public feedback and a recommendation regarding the Soldiers Monument during the Culture, History, Art, Reconciliation, and Truth process, also referred to as CHART. Whereas CHART's final report, published in August of 2022, stated that data collected over 11 months of public engagement, including dialogues, meetings, conversations, interviews, phone calls, and email communications, and the results of 2 surveys indicate that the Santa Fe community is still divided about what to do about the Soldiers Monument. And whereas ongoing public divisions about the Soldiers Monument was evidenced in the spring of 2023, when 4 city councilors introduced a resolution proposing to reassemble it, preserving the cracks as part of history and incorporating new, more inclusive language around its base. And whereas after receiving hours of largely unsupportive public testimony about the proposed resolution, including polarized perspectives, some members of the public describing pain felt regarding the existence of the Soldiers Monument, and other members of the public describing pain felt as a result of the damage to the Soldiers Monument. The councilors decided to withdraw the resolution from further consideration by the governing body. And whereas the plaza is listed on the national and state registries of historic properties, because in 1975, the city nominated the city park for that recognition with the federal government. And whereas the city's nomination was very clear that the property it was nominating was the plaza rather than particular objects then in existence in the plaza. The city's nomination identifies 1609 as the year of the founding of the city of Santa Fe, when the plaza began as a feature of the city. And 1846 is the year that from the plaza, General Kearny proclaimed the annexation of New Mexico into the United States. And the city's nomination describes the conditions of the plaza as quote unquote altered, having decreased from 2 city blocks to 1, and now including landscaping, flagstone, walks, benches, and cottonwood trees. By contrast, in quote Spanish times, the plaza was once twice as large and an open expanse of packed dirt. And the city's nomination states that after 1846, upon the arrival of the Anglo-Americans, the plaza was fenced in and planted with alfalfa, then reduced to its present size, and finally enclosed by buildings on 3 sides confronting the palace. And the city's nomination describes the plaza as a quote unquote site rather than a quote unquote structure or quote unquote object. The quote unquote present use as a quote unquote park rather than quote unquote museum, quote unquote government, or quote unquote military, among other options, described access as quote unquote unrestricted rather than quote unquote restricted, and describes the significance as quote unquote transportation, with the explanation that beginning in 1821, the trade route to Santa Fe from the United States was opened, and the quote plaza was provided the final goal for the caravans on their 8 or 10 week journeys, end quote, for traders and travelers on the Santa Fe Trail. And the city's nomination describes the Soldiers Monument as present in the plaza, a Soldiers Monument erected after the Civil War, but did not identify the Soldiers Monument as the basis for the plaza's significance, nor did it identify the significance of the plaza under any of the following available options, including quote unquote sculpture, quote unquote military, quote unquote politics / government, quote unquote art, quote unquote exploration / settlement, or quote unquote landscape architecture. And whereas the Soldiers Monument's purpose is distinct from the plaza's, the Soldiers Monument was funded by the territorial legislature of New Mexico in the 1860s and erected on federal land to recognize local veterans. 3 sides of the base of the Soldiers Monument commemorate soldiers who fought in the United States Civil War in the battles with Confederate forces, including the Battle of Glorieta Pass that allowed the Union to retain control of the American Southwest. And the 4th side originally stated, "To the heroes who have fallen in the various battles with savage Indians in the territory of New Mexico," also referred to as the 4th plaque. And whereas the Soldiers Monument, its plaques and its location on the plaza have been controversial for at least 115 years. In 1909, New Mexico Governor Bransford Prince publicly opposed a proposal to cut out the word quote unquote rebel in 3 places on the plaques and replace it with quote unquote Confederate. In July 1973, the city council voted to remove the entire Soldiers Monument after receiving a letter from then Governor Bruce King that requested removal of the 4th plaque, stating that the word savage was offensive to Indians and non-Indians, end quote. In September of 1973, the city manager reported that David King, the state planning officer at the time, requested that the council rescind its action regarding the Soldiers Monument, and the council voted to rescind. In 1974, someone chiseled out the words quote unquote savage from the 4th plaque, and shortly thereafter, the All Indian Pueblo Council quote unquote strongly urged that the word savage not ever appear on the Soldiers Monument again. In 2000, the NAACP Santa Fe branch submitted a guest editorial responding to the historic Santa Fe Foundation, defending the NAACP's proposal to remove the Soldiers Monument from its location in the plaza, noting that, quote, "We have a beautiful veteran cemetery where we have ceremonies every year to honor those killed as a potential ideal setting for the monument," end quote. Also in 2000, the Historical Society of New Mexico wrote to the city of Santa Fe's mayor, council, manager, and quote unquote people of Santa Fe that, quote, "the words savage Indians excluded the Pueblo Indians, who had always been regarded by the Spanish, the Mexicans, and then the quote unquote Anglos as quote unquote civilized Indians. And in that removal or destruction of the monument would be akin to book burning." Whereas the plaza previously featured other structures in its center, a 1992 archaeological report regarding the plaza describes at least 3 prior structures: a rock sundial in late 1820s, a pyramid that replaced the sundial, quote, 50 feet in height, erected as a quote unquote memento of Mexican independence, which came down in 1845, and a bull ring that briefly replaced the pyramid. And whereas the city's historic district code does not apply to the Soldiers Monument and associated structures because they are quote unquote objects excluded from the code's requirements, quote unquote objects include quote sculpture, monuments, boundary markers, statutory and fountains. See Santa Fe CC 1987, section 1412.1. And whereas the New Mexico Prehistoric and Historic Sites Preservation Act, NMSA 1978, sections 18.8-1 to 8, applies to a city program or project if the project would, 1, be an adverse effect on the plaza, and 2, has a prudent or reasonable alternative. See sections 18-87 and 18-83C. And whereas the city of Albuquerque and Rio Arriba County have recently suffered violence in relation to the placement of controversial monument spaces. For example, on September 28th, 2023, a shooter violently attacked community members celebrating Rio Arriba County officials' decision to postpone the county's plans to relocate a statue of Conquistador Juan de Oñate to just outside the county annex building. And on June 2020, there was a shooting in Albuquerque during a protest of a statue of Conquistador Juan de Oñate. And whereas continuing the status quo of a plywood box surrounding the Soldiers Monument's base or reconstructing the Soldiers Monument in the plaza detract from its use as a community gathering space, and reconstruction could be a safety threat to the public. And whereas the Santa Fe National Cemetery, located approximately 1 mile northwest from the plaza, is a national shrine to veterans. It flies the U.S. flag over well-kept grounds and headstones and monuments that commemorate the lives and services of veterans. And whereas at the close of the Civil War, the federal government established what became the National Cemetery for the reinterment of Union soldiers who died during the Civil War there. Whereas initial internments at the National Cemetery were the remains of 265 U.S. soldiers from the battlefields of Glorieta, Klauskis, and Fort Marcy. Whereas the National Cemetery also includes monuments and memorials dedicated to groups of veterans, including several memorials honoring veterans who served during the 1800s, a memorial to the World War II glider pilots, a memorial to women who served in the Navy, and a China-Burma Indian Veterans Memorial dedicated to the memory of men and women who fought in World War II. And whereas the National Cemetery's dedicated purposes and the Soldiers' Monuments purposes are aligned, and whereas determining the next steps for the Soldiers' Monument requires the governing body to propose a plan, and whereas relocating the Soldiers' Monument to the National Cemetery would not adversely affect the plaza, and whereas there is not a prudent and feasible alternative to relocating the Soldiers' Monument to the National Cemetery, the relocation would protect both the plaza and the Soldiers' Monument and would sustain, if not enhance, the historic basis for the city's nomination, including the importance of the plaza, including the importance of the plaza's location at the end of the Santa Fe Trail and the plaza's use as a central and historic town plaza and park that is accessible to all, used as community gathering place for social and economic purposes. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the governing body of the city of Santa Fe that the city is committed to the plaza's continued use as a city park and central plaza, accessible to all, and to continuing the plaza's historic, social, and economic purposes, featuring community gatherings and celebrations. Be it further resolved that the city manager shall investigate whether it is feasible to move the Soldiers' Monument to the National Cemetery, preferably close to where the Civil War soldiers that the monument commemorates were laid to rest. Be it further resolved that if a relocation is feasible, the city manager shall proceed with proposing budgets and contracts to expend funds to remove the fourth plaque and relocate the Soldiers' Monument, including steps to preserve, protect, and minimize harm to the plaza. This resolution was brought to me, this idea was brought to me by constituents in May of 2023. I told my constituents at that time that I didn't think it was a proposal I could bring forward because I felt like this community was too polarized. That changed for me with the events that happened in Espanola when the county commission there tried to put the statute of Oñate back near a county building. That was so controversial. There was gun violence, and I think that for me tells me that putting the obelisk, the Soldiers' Monument, back in the center of our plaza might be so controversial that it's possible it could be a public safety threat. My constituents did reach out to the National Cemetery to see if this is something that would be feasible, possible. The National Cemetery director responded to them almost immediately that they would need an official proposal to pursue it further, but they expressed their interest. And we've since learned that if the National Cemetery were formally asked by the city, they would have to forward that ask to Washington, D.C. For a federal process to determine whether the monument would be appropriate in the National Cemetery. We learn this resolution has gone through several of our advisory committees. We learned from the Veterans Advisory Board that there's actually criteria for accepting these kinds of applications for memorials, and that would have to be evaluated. They do say that if a monument or memorial is considered offensive, it cannot be placed in the cemetery. I think we would have to go through that process to know whether this monument would be offensive. It's my belief that putting this monument in its context in the National Cemetery, it was originally built to be a monument to Civil War veterans. If it were placed in the National Cemetery near the graves of Civil War veterans who are buried or interned there, and if we remove the fourth plaque, which has been controversial, I think it may be a way to preserve the monument itself and maybe alleviate the controversial nature that we have experienced to date. We have, as I mentioned, this has gone to two advisory committees. It's scheduled to go to the H board next week, not as a project, but as a piece of legislation for their input. What we've heard from our advisory committees, it's been to the Arts Commission and the Veterans Affairs Board. What we have heard from those two groups reflects the polarization in the community. The Arts Commission did not take a formal vote, but as we do in executive session, there was a general consensus that this was something that was worth, this resolution had an idea that was worth pursuing. And the veterans, in the letter in your packet, you can read, not only let us know about the guidelines, but also let us know that their idea would be restore this monument to the plaza and add security cameras and update the plaque to add an explanation as to why a new plaque was installed in place of the one that was controversial. Let's see, I am almost done. I thank you for your patience, Madam Chair and committee members. I guess the last thing I would add at this point is just that we do have a number of amendments. I don't think they're in your packets tonight. We are making sure that they are correct before we offer them, but I can outline quickly the nature of them. And I did talk about them at the meeting on Monday. One, we did hear at the Arts Commission from commissioners that it would be nice if the resolution reflected the fact that the history of indigenous Pueblo Indian people in this area. It doesn't currently talk about the communities that came prior to the arrival of the Spanish in this area. So we are working on that language. Our legislative people have been talking with Councilor Castro, with members of the community who have knowledge, and also have been to the library to do some additional research so that we get that right. The other thing that the amendments will do is make sure that the work done to determine feasibility of moving the monument, I use that term very broadly. It's the biggest, it is a general word to encompass a big umbrella of lots of things that have to be done. We would need to make a formal ask to the National Cemetery. They would have to put it through their process. We would also need to hire structural engineers who would then help us understand what is necessary in rebuilding the monument. And then we would also need experts to help us understand how one might go about moving this monument. So during all of that feasibility work, the amendment talks about bringing back any work that's being done that the city manager basically I can actually read you the language, which I have here. The city manager shall report to the governing body at regular intervals regarding the status of determining the feasibility, including any reports or expert analysis, so that we can be kept in the loop as these things develop. and we can continue to express our support, or maybe this takes a turn where this isn't a feasible idea, whether it's because it's far too expensive and we don't have the funds, or we can't get help in funding it, whether it's because the National Cemetery won't take it, or possibly that there isn't a way to put the monument back together again. We don't know any of the answers to those things, and we won't until we undertake this work. We can't undertake this work until the governing body provides the direction to the staff that this is what we would like to see done. Finally, and probably most importantly, is that there will be a number of be it further resolves added, that we will go through the process that is outlined in, let me get this right, the New Mexico Prehistoric and Historic Sites Preservation Act. We do not believe that that is required, but I am willing, the co-sponsors and I are willing to say that we will go through that process. And I think, one reason certainly is that it will allow for more experts to weigh in on the nature of this project and whether it's appropriate. With that, Madam Chair, I will stop talking, and I again thank you for listening. And I'm sorry it takes so long to get through what is a fairly complicated series of information. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually do appreciate it. Now I'm beginning to think maybe we should always read our legislation out loud. I think it's helpful. I mean, I do think that there's oftentimes that people, members of the public, they're not reading through all of our legalese. So thank you for that. Counselor Chavez, I will pass it on back to you.
Thank you. All I really want to add to this is I think that, Counselor Romero Worth has really taken the lead on this, and I feel like she's been the kind of example of this being a process that's the beginning of actually listening and responding through legislation on doing what's best and coming to a solution. This is a very difficult topic, and I said this on Monday. The feelings and the perspective and the opinion is very diverse around this, but we want to come to a solution. I think that's what we all have in common in regards to this topic. And I just want to applaud her efforts in bringing this forward in a very thoughtful way and being open to listening and doing the work and giving up the time and really understanding what individuals' perspectives are, and just emphasizing as well that we go through this process so that we also can have input from our colleagues on governing body, so that we could have input from the public. The process was created so that there's this community involvement and this community voice. So yes, we have this in front of us, and not many people may not agree and may have their own opinion, and that's why we're in this process, so that we can reshape it and have input and ultimately vote on amendments, vote on what we think is best regarding this topic, and hopefully come to a solution where everyone is at least heard. Because ultimately, when we're in city government, solutions don't mean everyone is necessarily happy, but at least we can be respectful enough so that everyone is heard. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'll turn it over to you, Chair. I do think the other co-sponsor has some things to say as well.
Thank you, Counselor Chavez, and that was precisely where I was going next. Counselor Castro, to you.
Yes, I'll be brief, but I do want to just sort of put out one of the pieces of my amendment so that if anybody has any interest in giving me feedback, I'm super open to that. And I think it's in the same vein. It would be it further resolved that if the relocation is feasible, the city manager shall work with relevant committees, advisory boards, and community stakeholders to best represent the true history of the monument and the events surrounding its installation and removal. And so I think that this whole process of going to all the advisory boards, and thank you, Councilor Romero Worth, for being at many of these meetings, has really taught us a lot and been really insightful. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, this item was pulled by both myself and Counselor Garcia. So Counselor Garcia, I will pass it on to you now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a lot of feedback on Monday, and I don't want to reiterate what I spoke to a couple days ago, just regarding some feedback in regards to some of the proposed amendments that folks are working on. It was stated by one of the sponsors that there are trying to incorporate some history, pre-Spanish colonial settlement, and I would highly recommend to work with our city historian. That's why we've got the city historian. So ensure that we're utilizing that tool to provide information to incorporate into this proposal. Another comment regarding the Arts Commission. I see it from a different perspective in regards to just being able to take a conversation that they had and look at it as there was general consensus, which I'm going to put it in a different context of the Veterans Advisory Board, just because they also spoke to this, and I had the opportunity to attend their first meeting. And it was from my participation and interpretation of that the board at that time was open to relocating the monument. There was even some board members that had wrote an op-ed in the newspaper. But as time went on, that board had a completely different opinion and actually solidified it with a vote. And so I think I appreciate the Arts Commission taking this into consideration, but without any formal stance taken, I look at it in the same vein as a public member coming in, providing us input for 2 minutes, because public doesn't have the opportunity to provide a formal vote, and neither did the Arts Commission, which I wish they would have, because that's why we had sent it to that body. Now let's look at what the resolution proposes and just go over some of the concerns, and I will restate the concerns I have in regards to, sending it to, it doesn't state in here, but it just says the city manager shall investigate whether it's feasible to move the monument to National Cemetery. I will be introducing an amendment to strike a lot of this because I think what's needed here and should only be here is the feasibility and investigation of even moving this monument if it's possible. Because as noted in Veterans Advisory Board letter to us, it's clear as day in the policy that they're not going to take something that has challenges behind it. The monument wasn't torn down because it was embraced by our entire community. And I think the federal government is going to look at that from that perspective and say, it's evident and it's clear as day. Why are you even submitting an application to us? And I don't want the city to go down a path we already know the answer to. I mean, we don't meet the criteria. It's stipulated in that letter that the Veterans Advisory Board so politely referenced for us. And, for those members of the public that did not have the opportunity to participate in Monday's meeting, I'll restate what they said to us. And so this is from the Veterans Advisory Board Chair, which is Mr. Jim Williams. And he says, in doing research into this issue, we found a memorandum dated January 3rd, 2009 from the Undersecretary of Memorial Affairs titled Guidelines and requirements for review and acceptance of memorials in national cemeteries. This document establishes policies and procedures for organizations wishing to establish memorials on national cemeteries. Now, side commentary, that's exactly what we are setting out to do. To establish a memorial on national cemetery land. So the letter goes on to state, in 3 places in the document, there are clear restrictions on the memorials that would be approved. The language in each is essentially identical in paragraphs 3.1.6, commemorative works, 3.3.6, inscriptions, and 4.1.6, standardized memorial monuments. The guidelines note that applications for memorials that, quote, could be considered offensive, end quote, will not be approved. Letter further goes on, given the history of controversy and vandalism surrounding the Soldiers Monument, we are highly skeptical of the VA's Office of Memorial Affairs would look favorably on a request from the city of Santa Fe to relocate the monument to the National Cemetery. Then further goes on, the Veterans Advisory Board therefore recommends the city retain the monument on the plaza, its historic resting place, and undertake the following measures. Restore the obelisk on top of the monument space, contract for the construction of a neutrally worded plaque to cover the controversial inscription of the north-facing plinth, update the interpretive brass plaque on the concrete stand at the south side of the monument to add an explanation as to why a new plaque was installed on the north-facing plinth. And then lastly, install security cameras to monitor the monument 24/7 as a deterrent to any further vandalism. And so this is coming from the Veterans Advisory Board, as I mentioned, who had from my observation and perception of their first meeting, had a different perspective on this proposal. And as I also stated, there was a letter to the editor from one of the board members, I believe Mr. Williams and member Mr. Donato. And I would highly recommend that any of the governing body members have not read that, please read that and then go back and reflect to this letter. So my concerns are we have the guidelines in front of us. And so my question is more so why would the city want to take a path that clearly does not meet the criteria? And I think it's just a waste of time, energy, and effort of staff resources.
Councilor Merowith, did you have a response to that question?
Sure,
It
Madam
wasn't-
Chair.
It was a statement, not a question, Madam Chair.
He framed it as a question, sorry. He said he had a question.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer, but I don't need to. If he doesn't want to hear an answer, that's fine.
Sure, I'm happy to have the sponsor respond, but
Councilor, go ahead. Romero Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I did address this in my opening. I think the advisory boards do reflect the polarization that's in the community. I think the word that I would zero in on in this Veterans Affairs letter is that they, quote, say, we are highly skeptical. Yeah, I don't think we will know for sure until we ask and until they go through the process. Because again, I think by taking off the 4th plaque and by setting the monument, this very historic monument, in context, that we might cast it differently. So, and I've said this, I think I said this Monday night, my aunts and uncles are buried in the National Cemetery. I certainly would not want to do anything that diminishes the National Cemetery in any way. And so I think that's also why there's a process to evaluate whether the memorials that are under consideration, the application for memorials, have to go through a process to determine that they fit within the ceremonial and honorary nature that is the National Cemetery. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garcia, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I don't want the public to get the perception that I'm thinking that, or I have the belief that the movement of such monument would negatively affect the cemetery. I'm reading off the guidance provided in regards to establishing new monuments, et cetera. Because, I mean, as myself, both my grandparents, both sides of the family are buried at National Cemetery. I've got uncles buried there. I mean, my parents will be buried there. My father is a Vietnam veteran. So I take that as very hallowed ground. Has nothing to do, I'm bringing this point up because we are now have evidence and policies and procedures from the federal government in regards to should something be accepted, here's the guidance, here are the guidelines. And to me, it's clear as day that we don't meet that criteria. So I you know, I think it's, we know the answer. Is that the answer is clear as cut for that. Now, I want to get towards an amendment I have proposed. I will have many following this, but you know, the word feasibility here, I have very, very, very grave concerns about the use of that because as I mentioned on Monday, even through this dais, there's probably 9 different interpretations of what's feasible. And that is where I have proposed an amendment to strike a portion of the resolution, which would allow for the governing body to take a vote and determine feasibility. So that's why I'm striking a portion that after what is proposed, if it's feasible, then it would go to the city manager. It shouldn't even get to that step. It should come back to the governing body before any next steps are determined, for the governing body to determine that. So the public can read that amendment. It's in the packet. I believe it got updated a moment ago. But I definitely want to allow for the public to review that amendment, just given that it had time or it just got uploaded today. And I don't know if we were able to get clarification on the fiscal impact report because it's got a $10,000 fiscal impact report, but there's a lot of work proposed for this $10,000. And in my opinion, the kind of most important part of what's being proposed here is looking at the structural integrity of this monument, which helps to determine feasibility, and to contract with such an entity. Is $10,000 enough money? So I guess my question to the sponsors is $10,000 enough money to contract with a structural engineering expert to get this work done?
The response from,
Is
Anybody have
Aaron in the chamber?
yes, City Attorney McSherry.
Yes, Chair Cassett, members, Councilmember Worth. I worked with Arts Director Chelsea Johnson to come up with this number. She thought it was high. And I have no personal knowledge of it.
Okay. And in my opinion, that's very low for the expertise of a structural engineer. So I would highly recommend the sponsors go back and review that number, because if we've only got $10,000 to try to conduct a feasibility exercise, that is not going to happen with the structural integrity part. So Now, I guess my last comments on this before I yield the floor is, and I've mentioned this again last time, but I will continue to bring this up, given that this is a huge component of the challenge I have with this resolution, which is that the city has now flip-flopped on ownership. The city has taken the stance up until, I believe, 2021, 2022, and I'll let the city attorney determine or clarify that timeframe for me. But until then, it was under the belief of not only experts, not only governing body entities, but the general public that the state of New Mexico owned this monument. And then that opinion got flipped by the city recently, that the city now owns it based off a 1901 declaration. So I guess I don't understand why why we're countering what the experts have said in the past. And I've reached out to some folks that have been involved in this process. And they're still of the mindset that the state owns it. Now, I guess the question is posed to the city attorney. Have we reached out to the state of New Mexico to ask them if they own the monument? I know we've reached out to the state with saying, hey, we think we own this. But have we reversed the question to the state to say, do you own the monument versus it's all about how you ask the question. And so I guess has the city of Santa Fe asked the state of New Mexico if the state owns the monument?
City Attorney McSherry, and then Councilor Mara Worth, I see your hand is also up for this question.
Yeah, Madam
pass it
Chair,
to-
I think I want the city attorney to ask or to answer this question, but I think it would be fair to the public to set this in the context of the research she has done, because everyone may not be familiar with the research and legal background about ownership, which I don't know. I'd be curious to know. This is research that's been done by the city attorney's office since this whole issue with the monument in the last 4 years has come up. I don't know whether it had ever been done before, but we certainly have it now. And I think it's really important backdrop and information to people to have as first. And then absolutely, I would want the city attorney to answer the councilor's question.
City Attorney McSherry, I'll pass it over to you.
Chair Cassett, Councilor Garcia, Councilor Merworth. I guess just starting with, we'd always thought, when the initial various vandalism happened in Obelisk, we had questions from the FBI. Is it federal? People are telling us it's federal. Should we be charging federal charges? I talked to the U.S. attorney about it. There was questions, is it state? Is it local? So this idea that everyone knew the jurisdiction is very perplexing to me, given that I had conversations with all sorts of people who didn't know who the ownership was. As to what criminal charges should be applied. Should the FBI be involved? Should the U.S. attorney be involved? Should the state be involved? If so, which ordinances was the state filing under, given what was the state? And there's been a lot of confusion. When people say something is a state monument, they might be saying it's a state registered monument or a state funded monument. In this case, it was a territorial funded monument and a state registered and federally registered monument, right? So there's all sorts of terms that have been intermixed. And I've seen no expert opinion whatsoever on the ownership anywhere. I've seen statements without any sort of citation to any sort of basis, because I certainly would have been interested in what the source for any sort of suggested ownership was, and certainly would have looked at that. There's been no support for anything whatsoever. And I guess to clarify, we don't do the property research in my office. There's a property manager out of the land use department who does this for properties on a daily basis. This is a question that comes up for property all the time in relation to who's the owner of record in the city clerk, in the county clerk's office. That's the same thing we did in this case. Who owns it? That's property manager looked into the ownership. And the ownership was, so you don't do opinions about property ownership. This is not an expert opinion. You just go look, and you find out what the title says, and then that's the answer.
What did the title say?
Title said that the federal government recognized the city ownership of the plaza in 1901 pursuant to a congressional act, and they issued this patent, which has been filed at the county clerk's office. That is what we base our ownership of the plaza itself upon. And it said that all fixtures were transferred with it. It excluded certain fixtures, such as the federal courthouse. It did not exclude the obelisk. It recognized the obelisk was a fixture because it mentions it for the measurements from the plaza for all the property measurements radiating from its center. I do not ask questions on behalf of the city. So no, the city has not asked the state anything.
Okay, well, I do know that you had reached out to the state,
Various actors at the state.
yes, and trying to clarify if the city owned the monument.
No, just letting them know where our understanding came from and alerting them, this is what we understand. Do you know anything else? Because people like yourself, Counselor Garcia, have asked the question. So if there were anything else out there, I'm absolutely want to know about it.
Okay. Well, I do, and I have the two, and I'm happy to provide it to any of the governing body members, but I know that there was two separate instances that you reached out to former employee Peter Ives with the state, providing information and trying to get a response from the state confirming that the city owned the monument. There was no responses to those emails that you had sent to Mr. Ives. And I'm happy to read those emails to recollect folks' memory, but those are emails that were sent out. And so I guess my original question was, have we posed the question, does the state own the monument? Because again, I get back to reading or get back to issues of that I've had where historically folks have verified or through their knowledge that the state owned it. I mean, what I'm going to do is let me look something up because I want to make sure I'm not misstating. So because of the ownership, the issues I've had, these are questions I've posed to legal counsel for the city. What research and or investigation was conducted into the decision made by the city council to not remove the soldiers' monument? I have never received a response in regards to that. What research and or investigation was conducted to seek documents, evidence, testimony, or supporting information was provided to the city council in 1973 that led to the city council rescinding their decision to removing the monument? I have not received any response to that question.
Counselors, can I answer these one by one?
Sure.
Okay. I cannot, for number 2, the one you just read, which is the most proximate in my mind right now, I can't read people's minds. You asked me to tell you why someone did something in the 70s.
No, I'm saying through research, there could be documents, minutes, letters. I mean, so let me, and
Please reread the question.
what research and or investigation was conducted to seek documents, evidence, testimony, or supporting information that was provided to the city council in 1973 that led to the city council rescinding their decision to removing the monument?
That led to them doing that.
Yes.
That means you got to go into their brains to
No,
find out what led them to do.
I'm asking for documents, evidence, testimony, or supporting information. So there,
Did I do research? Absolutely. I requested all information on the obelisk from anyone in the city. And I got a lot.
so there,
I have no idea what it led anyone to do in the 70s. I'm not going to answer that type of a question.
No, Counselor, let me take this. I think that the clarity in the question is understanding what research has been done around the history of the obelisk. But yes, I would, that the logic that was drawn from documents to that conclusion is not something that the city attorney is privy to. So maybe restating the question of what research has been done around the information that was privy to the obelisk during this time period. If there was something specific that was from this period that, was brought forward as evidence, but I know it'd be really hard to,
So counselors, I think this is extremely irrelevant to everything we're doing. Who cares why someone made a statement in the 70s in minutes?
Because it ultimately determines ownership. We're taking.
No, it absolutely does not. What someone said in a meeting about what someone else said about who thought they owned something doesn't determine ownership. That is not how you determine ownership. If that were the case, we would all just be taking each other's property by saying we owned it.
Okay, so I want to refer back to a portion of the resolution because it helps to demonstrate relevance. Because I think at the end of the day, we want to ensure the city is moving forward appropriately. And so I'm going to look at page 4 of the resolution. And I'm going to start with line 4. And this is speaking specifically to the topic. In July of 1973, the City Council voted to remove the entire Soldiers Monument after receiving a letter from then Governor Bruce King. So let me stop there. Do we have that letter? That should be somewhere, I would think. So I'm going to continue to read on. That requested removal of the 4th plaque stating that the word savage was offensive to Indians and non-Indians. Then it goes on to state on line 8, in September of 1973, the city manager reported that David King, the state planning officer at that time, requested that the city council rescind its action regarding the Soldiers Monument, and the council voted to rescind. So something happened there. There was information provided because, as reported even in the media at the time, per September 25th, 1973 Santa Fe, New Mexican article, the then city manager at the time, Philip M. Baca, stated, and in the article it states this, quote, "Since the monument is state property," Baca said, "we don't plan to tinker with the monument." So I think my question revolved around, there's got to be a wealth of information that led to these decisions being made and then decisions being rescinded. Why was that?
Look, I'm actually going
Chair
to stop this line of
Cassett,
questioning.
counselors, that is in there to show that there's been controversy. It has nothing to do with showing about ownership.
So-
The only reason that that's stated in there is just, that's what the resolution is saying, is there has been controversy
I'm going
about
to
what to do with the monument.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this line of questioning. The city manager is on record stating that she has requested and has reviewed every document that we have been able to find at the city. And there's probably documents elsewhere, but I'm sorry. I
Let
will
me
not speak for
restate,
you.
I did
Go
not
ahead.
state that.
Okay.
We produced tens of thousands of documents in the lawsuit. Did I review them all personally? Absolutely not.
So, but what the point is that there has been a vast amount of research done. And at this moment, there is nothing that shows that the obelisk is owned by anybody but the city. Am I correct in that statement?
That is correct.
Okay.
And can I add here?
Yes, Councilor Merworth.
The other thing is there has been no challenge to the chain of title, which I think is another important point. I mean, what happened, why the council voted and then rescinded back in the day, there could have been a lot of reasons for it. It could have been political. It could have been, who knows what, what caused, and this often goes to legislative intent. And, I think to the city attorney's point, to the motivations of the individual actors about why they cast their votes. I mean, those aren't things that we can really go back and see. But if we're, again, if we're looking, the city attorney has done an extensive legal analysis in conjunction with the land use department. And and we've determined that what's on record with the county clerk where you record property is that the city owns this. Now, whether that work had ever been done before or not, we don't know. I haven't seen that. And nobody's challenging the chain of title. So I don't know, and until someone does, we own it.
Well, that begs to my original question, Counselor Romero Worth, which is, why has the city not reached out to the state of New Mexico formally to clarify, does the state of New Mexico own the monument? Let them tell us no. Let them tell us let's hear what they have to say.
I'm going to ask us to move on from this topic. Let's go to the next. Do you have any further questions on another topic at this moment?
No,
Has been-
I feel like I'm being silenced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
This conversation has happened repeatedly, and the same answers have come up. So, you are on record stating that you are not being silenced. I just feel that we need to make sure that we are not continuing to go down a spiral that has already been discussed multiple times and that there has been an answer. So are there any other questions on another topic at this moment? And if not, then Counselor Faulkner.
So a couple things that I'm observing. One, I think that the city has done the research. However, I think that Counselor Garcia's point is poignant in that burden of proof is at issue. And I do understand why you're asking these questions, because how you ask a question shifts the burden of proof. And so I think you have a valid point in asking, how did we ask the question? Do we ask the question or do we propose the answer? So if we propose the answer, the burden of proof is no longer on the state or anybody else. If we ask the question, the burden of proof shifts to the state. And that is a valid point. And one thing that I'm struggling with on this issue is there is a singular plaque on the monument that is offensive. And everyone agrees it's offensive. Everyone agrees it's offensive. And this issue has become politicized beyond all reasonable consideration. There is no reason that this should be such a hot button issue, other than the leaders of the city have allowed this to become politicized, when the answer is very simple. Remove the offensive language, respect the veterans, respect the people who are offended by what is on that plaque, and the rest of it is common sense. And this is the part that I am struggling with this issue, is we have politicized this for some reason beyond my understanding, other than there were outside influence who's had opinions, who forced this issue into a political conundrum of sorts. But as leaders, we have to be brave and say, no, we will not allow this to be politicized. This is ridiculous. The answer is commonsensical. Take off the part that is offensive. Respect the parts that are what the monument was meant to be. That's it. Common sense should apply here. That's it. All the back and forth about who owns the property, who doesn't own the property, all of this is nonsensical. And it's wasting the time of everyone in the city, because we have much bigger issues. We have a fentanyl issue. We have a homeless issue. We have panhandling. We have so many issues. There's so much bigger than this. And I do not mean to disrespect anyone who has heartfelt, deep wounds around this monument. But as leaders, we should be united on this issue, and we should be brave on this issue. And we should say to the people, the answer is commonsensical, because we have much bigger problems in the city than this monument.
Madam Chair, can I respond?
I have Counselor Castro, and then to you, Counselor Merworth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. And I will try to be brief because we have spent quite a bit of time on this issue. I just want to clarify and push back that one of the reasons that I am on this piece of legislation in particular is not the plaque, but the idea of the whole history of our town and of our city and how we have become part of the United States and the different flags that have flown over our city. And it's much, much bigger than just a plaque. And so though, politics is part of every single part of our life, down to how many how much we pay in taxes, how much we pay in gas, what the cost of living is. So to depoliticize something is almost impossible, in my personal opinion, because it's something that is part of our everyday lives. And we as a municipal government really have to listen to our constituency. And what my constituency has been saying is that they find not only the plaque, but the whole idea of having people who are not full-fledged citizens be considered Union soldiers without fully understanding the history of this monument is a big part of this conversation, and I don't want that to be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Merworth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank you, Counselor Castro. What I learned from the first go around when I was part of the group of counselors who brought the first resolution is it's not just about the plaque, the fourth plaque. It's about the symbol itself. And it's about, and this is where it gets tricky, and why I think for some, the symbol itself, the monument itself has become a symbol they can't, that represents things that they are hurt by. Again, what I'm wondering is if you remove the fourth plaque and you put this monument in a context that is part of its originating purpose, which is to honor the Union soldiers, can we get past the things that have made it controversial? So I think some of it is where it's placed. Putting it back in the center of the plaza is part of the problem for some. The fourth plaque is certainly a problem. And so, and I agree, we have spent a lot of time on this. We've spent a lot of money on this, but it is a very important and emotional topic and polarizing topic. And it's been very hard to find the right solution. And that's what we're trying to work with. But I think we also, 4 years after it's been toppled, people are tired of the box in the plaza. We need a solution. We need to find some way to move forward. And I don't think, I was hopeful that the chart process would lead us to a solution. I was hopeful that we could come to a community agreement about what to do. That's not what we got. And I don't know how we move forward from this. This is so, here's an idea. I also just want to quickly, Madam Chair, go back to the fiscal impact report. That is a guess as to what it will cost. You do not budget, as we have talked about before, from the fiscal impact report. So it's best guess by staff of what it's going to take to do the work that is necessary to do the proposal. You're not budgeting that amount of money. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Counselor Chavez?
Just have a very quick comment, and this, I'm just trying to clarify because I do think that we're having a lot of discussion and I never want to discount what's important to people, but I feel like how the resolution is written with having an investigation to involve State Historic Preservation Officer, with doing basically a feasibility assessment. I just want to note or emphasize that I imagine those steps would tell us being feasible if we own it in order to relocate it. So a lot of those answers may not come right now with this discussion, and I want to stress that. And that's why this isn't a resolution that's saying that something has to move somewhere. It's a resolution that is looking at feasibility in moving it. And it's involving individuals that will help make that decision and help with the investigation in order to do so. So I just want to stress that. I think that there's an interpretation that this is saying this has to be moved, and even assuming that we feel like we have enough information and the and we're in a place to move it. The resolution is not stating that in any way. The resolution is trying to pull a proposal to look at, investigate, and look at the possibility and feasibility of moving the monument. So I want to stress that because I feel like that point's being missed, and we're trying to get a lot of clear answers or something that hasn't even occurred. What we're trying to do in the resolution is really solidify that information and look at the possibility of moving the monument. So I think it's important for the public, it's important for all of us up here to understand that. With what we have included in the resolution, that information will come to light even more so than it is right now. And so I think everyone needs to be aware of that. And if I am speaking, if I'm incorrect, Councilor Romero Worth or City Attorney, please correct me. But as I read that, I feel like some of the answers we don't have right now will come through this process, and that's the point of this process.
Thank you, Counselor. Have you ever, no, Counselor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. But to that comment, Counselor Chavez, it does state about moving the monument in this, because it says, be it further resolved that if the relocation is feasible, again, who determines the feasibility? Is that the council? Is that the city manager? Who is the determining the feasibility? It then goes on to state the city manager shall proceed with proposing budget and contracts to expend funds to remove the fourth plaque and relocate the Soldiers Monument, including steps to preserve, protect, and minimize harm the plaza. So right now, the way this resolution is written, the feasibility study is taken, which I completely agree with. There needs to be a feasibility study done. But what it also is allowing for is that the city manager could then proceed with proposing budgets, removing plaques, relocating the monument. And in the way it's currently written, none of that is seeking the approval of the governing body. And I think that is where, if that is the intention, it should be clearly written here. I want the public to fully understand that the way this is written, that is a part of the proposal. And I'm not saying I have challenges with that or that. It's the way that it's written. And that is why I have major concerns with this resolution, and I'm not in support of it, because it's not taking the appropriate steps, because it's saying, okay, we're going to conduct a feasibility study and then take the next steps. That's not how we carry out a major significant project such as this.
I also just want to apologize, Councilor Garcia, you're right. Councilor Romero Worth and Councilor Castro are bringing amendments forward, and I'm looking at those. So it sounds like they've listened to some of your concerns respectfully. So thank you, you two. So I'm looking at those amendments. I feel like once those are presented and make it into the packet, I think you'll kind of understand where I'm coming from. So I apologize because that information hasn't been given to you. But I do want to say and just make it clear that this already has become a collaborative effort. There are amendments coming forward to, respectfully kind of capture the concerns that Councilor Garcia has, and involving the key individuals that should also be helping us with looking at this feasibility. And so I think those are forthcoming. I imagine that we will have those available to the public hopefully before the next committee or meeting that is scheduled for this. And I too have some concerns in maybe a proposal of some sort once feasibility is kind of determined, that the governing body have eyes on that again. So I am looking at a possibly another amendment. So I do want to just say, look how well we work together. With that, I yield the floor, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Chavez. Counselor Romero Worth, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with Counselor Chavez. There are amendments, as I spoke of at the beginning of the meeting. They aren't quite ready yet. I have seen a draft, but there's some tweaking that needs to happen before they're presented. And I would just say that I think, again, there will be multiple places where the governing body can have a say. And we'll see if the amendments address these concerns. You know, the city manager, and we talked about this Monday night, has to come to us to approve. The budgets are approved by us. Contracts at certain levels are approved by us. So I think there are multiple places where we can confirm that this is the direction we want to move in, and that things are moving in a way that we continue to support. And so we'll see if the language addresses these concerns. And, you know, I would say that we are working on that because, you know, it may be more expensive than we are up for. It may be that the National Cemetery doesn't accept this monument. It may be that it's not possible to put it back up. So I don't think I wish that we could have a solution that was tied up with a bow and all done, but I think we're going to be dealing with this issue at various levels for quite a while.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll take the floor now. Wow. Okay. So I've struggled with this resolution quite a bit, although some of the conversation today makes me hopeful that it's moving in a direction that I feel I will feel comfortable with. I think one of the issues that I have really been grappling with is over the last 4 years, I have had numerous conversations with individuals in the public, from specific groups, from specific viewpoints about the obelisk. And especially after chart and especially after the first proposal around how do we figure out how to move forward. And I'll have these really great conversations with individuals who feel, where I feel like there's room for more engagement, for more collaboration from the community. And then I will see these same individuals stand up at the dais or write something in the newspaper or in the comment section or on social media that make me wonder whether or not that truly is possible. I think I've said before, at least maybe not in public, but I think chart did not do what we wanted it to do, and I think it's okay to say that. We have a hard time in government saying something didn't work, but honestly, I think we need to say it more, because if something doesn't work, then that means we get to assess, you know, why not and what can we do better. Midtown is a really interesting example of this. We did a whole Midtown engagement process before my time, before any of our times that are sitting right here. That, from my understanding, was a very, you know, top-down engagement process, very, you know, come to City Hall, come to the convention center, fill out surveys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was a plan that was put forth. There was a lot of pushback from the community that they didn't feel that their voices were being heard. And we took on a second round of community engagement for Midtown. That was, we got a lot of criticism for it. You already did community engagement. Why are you spending more money on this? But we established the Midtown Engagement Partners that I thought was a really unique way of doing community engagement, where we activated certain groups that had specific interests or viewpoints around Midtown to help do this community engagement. And together, those leaders came together with what we now have as the Community Development Plan. And yes, we still tweak it. Yes, we still assess it. What I find interesting about it is that it's not that different from what had initially been proposed. There are definitely some key changes that I think we could not have gotten to without this process. But what was even more important is the buy-in that we got from the community. We didn't have anybody coming up to say that they were really opposed to this. We did have people saying that they understand it's a work in progress, but they were in support so far of what this plan was saying. I have frequently thought about whether or not that is something that we could undertake with the obelisk. I'm not sure, again, because the responses that I see, the behaviors that I have seen in public versus conversations have been very different. So I've been very torn as to where we start to move from this. I do think that assessing feasibility is important. And I am definitely in favor of that step because part of it was when we had chart, we didn't know what was feasible with the obelisk. And it was kind of this free for all. We had no parameters around whether or not this thing could go back up, whether it could be moved. Could it be, our initial proposal, which I've had some very interesting conversations around that, with somebody who told me that they were in favor and were at the meeting that night and didn't want to speak because they didn't feel comfortable speaking in favor of it. I think we had one person speak in favor of it, one of our District 4 constituents, and I was very proud to see him. And then I had somebody else who, a few people have been like, it'd be a great idea, and then describe our proposal. To which point I want to throw a shoe across the room because it's frustrating. That there was this support in that area. So that's why I've had such a hard time with this because I keep wondering, are our proposals off or is our process off? I think moving forward with feasibility is important. I would like to see, I think I'd like to see how we may better engage the community with this, with some more focus and with what we have learned both from chart and from Midtown. I was thinking that this maybe wasn't possible. And then on Tuesday, I went to, or maybe it was Monday, earlier this week, I went to a brunch for something called the Roots Program. And it's Palestinians living in Gaza and Israelis who are, or no, I'm sorry, West Bank, who are in the settlements and these conversations around how do they start connecting with the other. And what was really moving for me and really impactful was they started talking about how we have to respect each other's truths. There was this quote of you have to have the humility to enter into the legitimacy and identity of the other. And so I would disagree, Councilor Faulkner, this is not simple. I don't think anything about this is simple. As I've said about the obelisk multiple times, everything about it that people say is true, and that makes it very hard. These individuals also spoke of how uncomfortable it was to actually sit there and listen to the identity and perspective and accept it of the other side. And I started to think, well, they're killing each other. Maybe we do have a shot of having some of these conversations, which I think is why I've struggled so much, because this might be the right answer. I mean, it really might be. The last proposal also, I thought, was a very good proposal. We all signed on very quickly. I remember looking at it and saying, this is a great piece of legislation, really wonderful collaboration and compromise. And then, of course, we had this overwhelming response. I actually started rewatching that meeting in preparation for this discussion. I still say it goes on record as the hardest meeting that I have ever sat through, because there was such pain and division in the community. I worry about not doing anything with the obelisk because I worry that if we don't do something, we can't move past it. But then I do also wonder, if this is the symptom and not the root cause, if we move the symptom, are we going to, cause more division in that sense if we're not addressing the root? I think that for me, what I see is feasibility is crucial because I don't really know what the options are. I don't know what option we don't have. And at that point, with those parameters, I would be in favor of looking at how we better and more productively engage the community. I think that we've had a model that worked. And I truly think it's okay for us to say that chart didn't hit the mark. It's not that there wasn't insight. It's not that there wasn't progress, but I'm okay with saying that it didn't get us to where we wanted to be. So with that, a couple questions. So obviously, as we talked about, we do not have a budget right now for feasibility. That is something that if we move forward and we, direct staff, the city manager to move forward, we would get that. So we don't really know how much this would cost. In terms of applying or, or the question around the cemetery even taking it and, that question with the federal government, I'm not sure anybody has the answer to this, but do we actually have to apply to get any insight on that? So we actually have to go through a full application process. Okay,
Madam Chair, can I respond to
Yes.
some of what you're saying?
absolutely.
So yes, we, according to my constituents, according to, members of the Veterans Advisory Board, we would first have to make a formal ask that would have to come from an official at city government. I think if I asked, I think my colleagues would accuse me of acting unilaterally. I don't think that would be well received. I think the appropriate person to ask is the city manager. The city manager is certainly not going to ask unless the governing body on this topic suggests that this is the direction they want to move. So that the National Cemetery needs, let me get it verbatim, needs they need, let's see if I can find it. They would need an official proposal to pursue it further. So I assume, that could be as simple as the city manager in a letter asking if it's something they could do. I want to just say something about the chart process. It did not lead us to a definitive answer on what to do with the Soldiers Monument. I think there is a lot of richness in that report. And we actually have created an entire office, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, to start to make progress on some of those recommendations. So I just want to give that caveat on the chart report. I also would suggest to you, and I would, if the city attorney is up to speed on the engaging in the New Mexico Prehistoric and Historic Sites Preservation Act and having a hearing with the SHPO, which she can say what that means. I think that is further public engagement that you may be seeking. And I would also say that our FIR suggests a possible estimate about what it would cost. And of course, until we actually go out and try to sign up a structural engineer, and we'd probably have to go to RFP, I imagine, depending on the cost there, maybe not. Those are things that will develop over time, but none of this work can start until we approve a resolution saying that this is what we'd like staff to begin to work on. And so I don't know if the city attorney, I don't want to put her on the spot, but maybe she can give us a little bit of information about what it would mean to, even though we don't think that we have to, that we would go through the process that the New Mexico Prehistoric and Historic Sites Preservation Act contemplates.
City Attorney, and thank you, Counselor. City Attorney McSherry, do you have any more information on that process at this time?
Chair Cassett, Councilor Merworth. At a high level, it would be consulting with the State Historic Preservation Officer, that's what SHPO stands for, about adverse impact on the plaza and about whether or not whatever the planner project proposal is would pose an adverse threat to the plaza. And then if there was a conclusion that it did with the consultation, then the city would hold a public hearing to look at that proposal, any alternatives that would either be feasible and prudent as compared to what's being proposed, and if not, the city would look at mitigating steps it could take in relation to whatever the adverse effect is that had been identified
Thank you.
at a
Appreciate
high
that.
level.
Thank you. So a couple other questions that I have, and again, I don't think we can answer these right now, is we don't know what the definition of could be considered offensive is. So that is something that I would be interested, but again, it sounds like we would have to make the formal ask. Although it does beg the question. If we decide that this it could always be considered offensive, to the extent that it could not be altered to be put into context in a way that is unoffensive so that it would be accepted, should we even be considered putting this up at all? So I think that that is an important question for us to have, to talk about with ourselves, with the community. But again, I think that this is where some of these conversations around the division and how do we start to really look at the legitimacy on all sides of the argument, because there's absolutely legitimacy on every single side of this argument. That is so important. I do not think that we can lose that. And I think that is what has made this so hard is because I can argue, I would say, every single position on this one. I'm not sure I really have much else to say. I think at this time, what I would be more comfortable with is a resolution that is exploring feasibility and lays out a couple areas for feasibility. So both the feasibility to move, the feasibility to rebuild, which we actually don't even know if that's even a possibility. And then go from there, because again, right now, I'm not sure what the universe of options are. The community doesn't know what the universe of options are. I understand that these are tough conversations. It'd be really nice if we could, find a path and move forward. But I don't see that happening at this time. That said, when I'm looking at the language in Councilor Garcia's amendment, I agree with the striking, but for different reasons. My concern is not the definition of feasible, but rather I am curious what is feasible, and I would in fact want to add some additional language around and this may cover the, reconstructing it would have to be, we'd have to look at feasibility of reconstructing it to move it. So perhaps this does take care of that. And I think that that's important information to have before moving forward with new options. So I have nothing more to say at that. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so with that, I'd like to move forward with introducing my amendment that is in the packet.
We do not have a main motion on the floor at this time, so we do need a main motion on the floor.
Move to approve.
Second.
So now I'll be able to move forward with the amendment. And so what it does is on page 1, line 13, after the word and or delete, if feasible, to take appropriate steps to relocate the monument. And then action 2 is on page 7, line 5 to 8, delete, be it further resolved that if the relocation is feasible, the city manager shall proceed with proposing budget and contracts to expend funds to remove the fourth plaque and relocate Soldiers Monument, including steps to preserve, protect, and minimize harm to the plaza. And so the intention around this is to allow for the governing body to really understand what is feasible and to take into consideration that information without leaving any options off the table. I think, as Chair Katz had said, conducting the feasibility is critical, because I'd hate for us to be in a situation where there might be some folks in our community that think by passing this resolution, including this language, it ultimately means that the monument is being moved. By striking this, what it does is it says, look, we've got to see what's going on with this monument. Then we can take into consideration X, Y, and Z. So with that, I'll move to adopt this amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Counselor Castro.
Do you just want to say that I'm actually not opposed to the governing body having an opinion, and I very much agree. My concern is just that it's going to be a very lengthy process, and so we should be very clear on a timeline, and I hope that gets addressed in amendments.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time? And if not, can I have a roll call?
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
No.
Chair Cassie,
Yes.
motion passes. Amendment.
Thank you. I will just say that I do think that there's probably some more language to look at this, so I do look forward to some of the other amendments coming forward. But I would agree with this as a first step. Any other questions, comments before we take a final vote on the amended resolution? Counselor Faulkner.
I just want to clarify in context. I don't think this issue is simple in that it's not impacting our community in a very serious way. But my concern is we have very serious issues in the city. Fentanyl is destroying our city. Homelessness is awful. Panhandling is awful. Crime is awful. And so I just hope that we as leaders can find a way path forward that can get through this issue with respect to all parties and then move on to the issues that are having a horrific impact on our people.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
I'm going to abstain and I'd like to explain my vote.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Chair Cassie,
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote. Thank you. Counselor Garcia.
I voted to abstain because I think there's more work to be done on this resolution. And so until more work is done, to continue to support this as it is.
Thank you, Counselor. And I would just state that at this point, I feel that this is moving in a direction that I feel comfortable with moving forward with a very crucial, important feasibility study. And then after we have an understanding of what is possible of starting to move forward from there. There might be some other pieces that I would be interested in putting in at this time, but they might be something for the future. And again, I will continue to explore potentially what more focused community engagement might look based on the different lessons that we have learned from our undertakings of community engagement for various projects in the city. Okay, with that, I will move on to matters from staff. Thank you, City Attorney McSherry, and thank you, Councilor Maraworth, for being with us. Matters from staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. Just a couple of things. Last night I returned from a trip to Dallas. I was able to travel with members from the Santa Fe Public Schools, Community Educators Network, and the Partners in Education to speak with a group called Big Thought in Dallas and the Dallas City of Learning Initiative. And that's a citywide initiative where they focus on high quality summer learning and out of school time. It was really informative. So we will schedule a time to bring back a presentation of the other visits we made to other collaborative networks that we're working together to really support youth. So I look forward to sharing more with about those trips with you. And then we are celebrating our 1 year of Teen Night or Teen Center, and the Teen Night is going to be on Friday, September 27th, and the teens have decided that it's going to be a New Year's celebration to celebrate their 1 year. And then we'll have a community celebration forthcoming in October, so I will give you more information about that. I'm really pleased to say that significant repairs have taken place in the ice arena, and we are on track for ice building. They started that this weekend. I was there today, and it looks beautiful. So we're hoping, not without its challenges, but we're hoping to get our busiest time on the ice, open and ready. And with more information about that, we've also hired an ice arena manager that I'm sure a announcement will be coming about that. So we're really excited to welcome people back to the ice soon. We will be undertaking more repairs as we start looking at the overall health of the facility and maintenance going forward, but making sure that we can keep the ice arena in good condition for the next 25 years. And then on September 28th, I wanted to invite you all to the Chavez Center from 10 to 2. The Community Services Department is helping with an early childhood wellness fair put on by the Santa Fe Public Schools. We're really excited to be a part of that to celebrate all sorts of information, giveaways, fun for early childhood support. So spread the word on that. That's 10 to 2 on September 28th. And then there is on September 28th from 2 to 5, there will be a Southside Community Day that will be held at the Zona del Sol campus. And it'll be the Southside Library and the Teen Center will be participating. So stop by and say hello to the Southside neighborhood. And just something that's kind of fun that's taking place this weekend is the International Anza Society Conference. They're meeting in Albuquerque, but they meet all over Mexico, also sorts of different places. I've been to some of their meetings, and they're going to be taking a bus here on Saturday and visiting the plaza and some historic sites and eating lunch. So that's just kind of a fun thing that's coming to our city on Saturday. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Randall. Nothing today. All right. No, nothing, Marcella. All right. Moving on from matters from the committee. Any matters from the committee at this time? Counselor Castro?
Really quickly, I want to congratulate Director Randall and everyone at the city for a successful Mexican Independence Day in Grito, and hopefully that'll grow in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other matters from the committee at this time? Matters from the chair. Our next meeting is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, and at 7:01 p.m. we are adjourned. Thank you.